Okay, so episode 4 of Final Space Season 3. And this season is doing what I said that the previous season should have been doing, in that it's focusing, mainly on one character per episode. Obviously, Gary gets focus, or at least some of the focus on in pretty much every single episode. But this episode is Ash's episode, so yeah, so it was set up. So again, spoiler warning, but it was set up last season that there was something to Ash's powers and abilities, which was never quite explained, and it's not fully explained here, but it's heavily hinted at. So in this episode, the Lord Commander basically has everyone chained up, ready for Invictus to basically absorb them and take them over. But he doesn't do this to Ash. In fact, he tries to convince Ash to basically join him as his protege and that she is now home. Which, there's a lot of implication that she is from Final Space. Is she directly connected to Invictus? Maybe, possibly. It would explain, her powers and abilities, so it would kind of make sense in that regards. But she does get the shit beaten out of her. Her fingers get absolutely mangled in a fight against the Lord Commander, where they're crushed and all broken and all pointing in the wrong direction. Which, yeah, I'm glad Final Space is taking, advantage of being made for adults, which is not, what many adult cartoons actually do. Most of them might add a few swear words here and there to justify their age rating, whereas this one is, taking more advantage of it. Gary's mum escapes. Yeah, and there's a there's a slight moment where Avocado says, "Aren't you going to release us?" And she goes, "No time." And he says, "There's plenty of time." And I thought that, oh, are they going to go down the direction of, he is just going to go back to Invictus? But no, no, no. She's still on the same side as Gary. In fact, she actually calls Gary. Yeah, this episode, everyone gets back together in this episode for somewhat. And I do kind of like the awkward exchange in that Gary and his mum don't know whether to hug or high five each other. So it is a nice little awkward kind of moment. But yeah, she could have brought them with her, but I think though, I don't know, it could be just her instinct of self self survival first, or it could be, and this is me giving it a little bit more credit than it probably is, that she left them there because the Lord Commander would notice if all of them escaped rather than just one of them. I think it's the former rather than the latter, to be honest. We also get an update on Quinn in this episode that she has 36 hours and counting left to live as she's being poisoned by Final Space. Which, again, that could literally be any amount of time that they could have put on there. Whether Quinn will die or not, I don't know. The Lord Commander technically dies again in this episode, but Invictus just brings him back to life again. So, death in Final Space, unfortunately, is never an absolute thing, so you can never take it that seriously. I know it's meant to be taken very seriously in, Quinn dying, but the whole point, is in Final Space that people have come back, so basically most people who are supposed to be permanently killed off are brought back. The Lord Commander, so heck, even Gary to some regards. So yeah, it's not really something I can take as seriously or as big of a threat as it is because of it, unfortunately. Which is a shame, really. And Quinn hasn't had really much to do other than basically just reject Gary a bit because, she's worried about dying, which again is understandable, but there hasn't really been as much of development in her character other than that. So But again, there probably is going to be a dedicated Quinn episode later on, hopefully. Hopefully. Also, Gary's arm in this episode. Yeah, remember his robotic arm that he's had since episode 2 of Final Space? Yeah, it turns out that it can transform into a gun as well as a sword. Okay. In fact, they seem pretty self-aware of this, to the point where they're making jokes about how have we never used this before? How did I never know about this before? Yeah, the fact that you pointed out that, kind of cliche thing still kind of makes it a cliche. Because, I mean, it was literally just grabbed off a sort of standard sort of service robot that was on the Galaxy 1 originally. But, yeah, and the fact that this is the thing that, helps them get out of the situation, it just seems like a Deus Ex Machina. Like, if this was set up beforehand and there was hints to it, maybe, then okay. But the fact that literally this is set up and less than 5 minutes later it's then used, just like, yeah, come on. Come on. There's also that little tiger character who I literally keep forgetting his name because he only seems there to either... He's there actually for two purposes. One, to be irritating, but two, to provide exposition. He is the one who tells Gary that his arm does do something else. Again, he just kind of feels like a complete nothing character, and he just feels kind of pointless. I mean, he's basically just another Kevin, but Kevin is still here, so Kevin now feels even more pointless. Although Kevin's been barely in this series so far, actually. So, there's that. There's that. There is that. So, I'm going to talk about the ending. So, Gary does manage to rescue most of them. However, he is a bit too late to rescue Ash, who is taken over by Invictus. So, yeah, that is the big thing. And they do treat it like it is a big, massive thing. But then again, the same exact thing happened to Avocado last season. And to be honest, I think it was a bigger deal it happening to him than it happening to Ash, because Ash, like, other than being a bit of, the comic relief in being, the more dim-witted character, he hasn't really had any character development to him, and he hasn't really done much other than that, so it's hard for me to really care about this. I know it's meant to be a big, massive deal, but it's really hard to care about it, though they do actually leave it on an effective cliffhanger. The Lord Commander, after being brought back to life, Invictus is basically just telling him, oh, you failed, should have never, revived you. The Lord Commander just turns around and just says, give me my ship. Which I just found absolutely hilarious, because the fact that everyone else is kind of just like scared of Invictus. The Lord Commander could not give less of a shit. He is ordering Invictus in the same way he would order anyone else. And Invictus just gives him gives him his ship back, and that's where it ends, with the Lord Commander approaching the new Galaxy 1 or the Galaxy 2. I can't remember which one they called it. And that's how it ends. Which, again, I think, to be honest, for me, that is the more dramatic out of the cliffhangers, rather than Ash being taken over by Invictus. I think the Lord Commander, approach, because the Lord Commander, he is a lot more dangerous than he is. The problem is, he's a bit too overpowered and a bit too dangerous, to the fact that, everyone just kind of has to be a bit overpowered. And the fact that, Gary has guns and he's shooting the Lord Commander does nothing. He shoots him with the gun that his robot arm has, and that apparently is enough to blow his head open. Yeah, it's a bit... That is the problem when you're rising the stakes as high as they can be, and making, the enemies as powerful and that as possible. It gets to the point where it's just like, this is only episode 4. You know? If this was left to, a later finale sort of climactic battle, then yeah, but if the Lord Commander is just going to constantly show up throughout the season like this, it's kind of like less of a, big bad, or one of the big bads. Obviously, the ultimate big bad is Invictus, but to be honest, we haven't really seen him do that much. He basically just takes over people and gets them to do it, so meh. But I still did enjoy this episode. I still did enjoy it a lot, and it was nice that, there were still consequences to things, that they weren't just all going to get out of it without no scathes, so fair dues on that regard. And it was nice to finally get some more character development on Ash. We did get an episode dedicated to her in the previous season, which was nice, and it's nice to have another episode dedicated to her here. Ash is unfortunately losing that act, so he doesn't have a dedicated episode to him at all. So we don't really know that much about him, other than he's a bit, dim-witted. But yeah, overall, I enjoyed this episode, and we'll see how it goes from here. But yeah, it does have its, problem sort of leaning overhead of, you can only have so many battles before it becomes a bit monotonous, and you can only have the Gary fights big bad, this early on. Meh. But regardless, I enjoyed this episode, and yeah, that's basically it, really. Nothing else to say.